Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar today on an introduction to infographics in ArcGIS. It looks like people have stopped joining our room, so I'm going to go ahead and get started here. My name is Julia Bear, and today, alongside Julia Bell, but we're going to be talking about infographics in ArcGIS and how to get started in using them. So here we are, we're both solution engineers on the national government team. We're based out of the DC regional office. And at any point, if you have questions throughout the presentation, feel free to put them in a chat or follow up with us later as well. And so before I get started, I wanted to talk through some quick housekeeping things to help this webinar go smoothly. It is being recorded, so if at any point you have to leave or you want to catch up on one of our demos after, there will be a link on YouTube and you'll get an email with that link to view as well. As I said, feel free to submit questions throughout the webinar. We will talk through them at the end as well as be monitoring the chat. At the end of the webinar, we'll have a prompt on the screen for you to take a survey. That'd be great if you could take that. And then if there's anything else, please feel free to email Julia or myself or Raquel, who is helping to organize and coordinate this webinar. We recommend, so this is the GoToWebinar format. We recommend muting yourself just to help with sound quality and background noise throughout the webinar. And with that, I wanted to give a quick agenda for today's webinar. So we're going to start talking about an overview of infographics. I'm going to show an example of an infographic, and then the main focus of our webinar this morning is going to be focused on using infographics in Business Analyst, really emphasizing the out-of-the-box customizable nature of infographics in the application, and then ending with a discussion of infographics more broadly across the platform. So to give a bit of an introduction to infographics, I wanted to talk about what infographics are and why they are important. So I have a couple examples here of infographics from Business and Community Analyst. As you can see, infographics really help convey information in a visually attractive manner. It's easy to design to display content to your liking, to help communicate data, which often can be hard to understand, and communicate it clearly and efficiently through different messages and visualizations. It helps us to understand what we're seeing and have that self-contained summary so that we can quickly at a glance get to what we need and what we need to understand from our data. It's really all about presenting insights in impactful ways, so helping to explain context as well as cause and effect. So with that, before I get any further into the webinar this morning, I wanted to provide an example of an infographic in our platform. So here I have an example. This is in ArcGIS dashboards using configurable infographics from Business Analyst. This one is a COVID infographic template showing key indicators around hospital bed and availability, as well as demographic information, understanding at-risk populations, populations without insurance, populations more susceptible to COVID. And this infographic that's run in this dashboard, we can pull up the same infographic template for every county in the country. And the first county here alphabetically is Abbeville County in South Carolina. And with this infographic, we get that at-a-glance view. We can see that we have a very low number of hospital beds and ICU beds available, but we also have a fairly low population. So it kind of matches that supply and demand. But if I choose a different county here and I go to Albany County in New York, which has been in the news quite a lot, this same infographic will run and generate, and we get a different view of the same metrics. We can see here in Albany that we have a lot more hospital beds available, but we also have a much higher population. And this just viewing how these indicators and these graphs change over time, and taking what would otherwise be a lot of information that could be overwhelming and putting it in an easily digestible and visually appealing manner through this infographic. And so with that, I'm going to transition to Julia Bell, who's going to talk more specifically about using infographics in Business Analyst.
All right, thank you, Julia. Let me just share my screen. All right, so as Julia Bayer mentioned, there's a lot of different ways that we can share infographics and create them across the ArcGIS platform, but the most encompassing and overarching one by far is going to be business or community analyst, which is what we're going to spend the majority of our time on today. So before we jump into that, I just kind of wanted to go over some vocabulary terms that we're going to be using that describe business analysts so you kind of understand what we're talking about in our demos. And I did want to mention before we start as well that we're going to assume probably a basic understanding of infographics within this webinar, but if you are new to infographics, that's totally fine as well. The demos that I'll be doing in a few minutes are pretty out of the box, so if you wanted to come back to that recording later when it's posted on YouTube and follow through my steps with your own business analyst account, you could absolutely do that and create some of the infographics that I'm creating as well. So how would we go about creating those infographics? Well, we start primarily with a template within Business Analyst. So some of these can be pre-baked templates, or you can start with a blank template, which is really going to be kind of a whiteboard or blank canvas, similar to what you might see if you're creating a PowerPoint or a Word document. It's going to give you the opportunity, and you can see what some of these blank canvases might look like in the top right, to really drag and drop different elements into your template, onto your screen, based on what you want to show, how many elements, that sort of thing. So it's really kind of a whiteboard for you to play with how you'd like. And then those templates are then going to be made up of different elements, as I mentioned. So that's going to include things like icon, infographics, tables, images, text, maps, charts, all the sort of things that you're seeing in these example infographics here at the bottom. And I do want to point out the map here on the right side. So infographics definitely do not need to include maps, but we wouldn't be Esri or ArcGIS platform without including them, and they can definitely enhance your infographics in some cases. So what are some of the best practices for creating or generating an infographic? What we've seen typically is that people tend to start their report, if they're creating a report of infographics, with a title or cover page, and that report would be made up of pages that are generally thematic. So maybe you have one page that focuses on income, one that focuses on education, and then one that focuses on age profiles and that sort of demographic information. Each of those individual pages would then be made up of elements. So those would be the charts, the tables, the images, the maps that we discussed on the last slide. If you put it all together, it would look a little bit like this. So this is going to be an example of a report, a demographic report that was generated for 122 Cajon Street in Redlands, California, and the surrounding area. So the first page we're going to notice has population and household profile information. So it's including a map, some icons, some statistics. And then the second page is going to be an age pyramid, age profile, employment information, that sort of thing. So we have different pages, or I'm sorry, different elements make up the pages, which then make up the reports. And one of the benefits of Business Analyst is that these pages and elements can be dynamic. So as Julia showed with the COVID information, and that example, she just had to select a new county or a new study area, and the template remained that integrity. The elements were dynamic, but when we changed that location, the only thing that changed was the data. So this is really beneficial to us because we have the ability to really invest a lot of effort and time into creating templates like these. So these are going to be examples of templates that were created by my coworker, Helen Thompson, who is on the Business Analyst product team. And these templates, belong to her, but she shared them with the org. Some of them are public facing as well, so any of you could go and grab them from Business Analyst as well. But because of the template and library functionality of Business Analyst, we can devote a lot of time to creating these templates. And then if we pick a new study area, all we have to do is tell Business Analyst where that new location is, and the template will stay. It'll maintain its integrity, but the only thing that will change is the underlying data. So this would be a lot different from Excel, where say you're creating a chart for a certain location, and then you want to create a chart for a new location, you have to add in that new data and then rerun and create the chart or the graph. But here with the dynamicness of Business Analyst, we don't have to do that. So let's hop into a demo here. to see exactly what that would look like. All right, so what you're seeing here now is the Business Analyst launch page or the home page. I'm logged into my organization here, so I have access to all of the projects that I've been working on, including this Infographics webinar project as well. So I'm going to open that one here. And by default, I'm going to start with a map because, as I mentioned, site selection is very important for infographics. So I need to decide what site I want to focus on. So Julia told you earlier that we both work as solution engineers for national government, and I primarily work on the defense team. So one of my major contracts is the United States Army Corps of Engineers, and most specifically Galveston District. So for those of you that don't know, Galveston, Texas has been hit by a lot of hurricanes this season. And so they've had to evacuate the island several times and really prepare for that kind of natural disaster. So what I want to do is actually create an infographic that determines, how much of the population is at risk or vulnerable if one of these natural disasters were to occur. So that if they need to evacuate, they know what kind of people they need to evacuate. Are they elderly? Are they young? That sort of thing. So I'll go to Galveston and I'll create a site. This is going to allow me to select range rings. So when I hit apply, it's going to create range rings within 1, 3, and 5 miles around Galveston to give me a little bit of a different taste of different demographic areas. And I can change these distances as well. So now that I've chosen my site, what I can do is hop into the infographics. Cool. So this is going to be the key facts infographics. This is the default for business analysts. So if you guys were to hop into an infographic like I just did, this is the one you're likely going to see. So this has a lot of different demographic information, which is pretty helpful for the area. It's going to show me things like the population, education, employment, income, that sort of thing. And you'll notice that right now it's telling me the statistics for 1 mile outside of Galveston, but I can change this to 3 miles and 5 miles as well. And that information is going to update because, as I mentioned before, these templates are dynamic. I also have the ability to do side-by-side comparison. So if I want to see how, being a mile, 3 miles, or 5 miles removed from Galveston really affects my population numbers or things like that, I can do that as well. So I can see that population is really changing, definitely between 1 and 3 miles, but things like average household size really seem to stay the same. So that's a functionality that I have. So I'll go back to just focusing on one here. But as I mentioned, this is, key facts, it's demographic information, it's helpful, but I want to focus on the at-risk population or the people more vulnerable that would have more trouble evacuating, or if they got hurt, they would need more help. So I'm not just limited to the key facts within the Esri generated templates. I also have a bunch of different templates here, as well as ones that I've created before. So this is going to allow me to access any custom ones that I've made previously. But for today, I'm just going to use a standard infographic, and Esri actually has one for at-risk population. So I'm going to click into that and see what it looks like. This is going to show at-risk population of Galveston. So you'll notice it actually maintains that key facts card here, but we also focus on businesses, age profiles, and then we actually have a section for at-risk that's going to show me people with disabilities, people above 65, households without vehicles, which would be very difficult to evacuate. And then it's also going to show my study area and this table with primary languages spoken at home. So this would be helpful if we're evacuating, we know which languages we really need to put those announcements out in so that the most people can understand. So at a glance, this is pretty cool. It's mostly what I'm looking for, but I really don't care that much about how businesses are going to be affected. I really only care about the population. So I want to change it up a little bit, which I can do by clicking my Edit tab here at the top. So when this loads, it's going to launch me into my infographic builder. So here I have the standard infographic template, and now I have the ability to change any parts that I don't like. So if I wanted to edit it just a little bit, I could change maybe the colors or the symbology. I could go up to these variables. I could, delete the ones that I don't want, maybe add some new ones. But I'm just going to replace it completely because I'm not really interested in businesses in this scenario. So I'll replace it with another infographic. And there's a lot of different standard panels that are kind of pre-baked into Business Analyst that I could, pick and choose from. So a lot of these we saw within Key Facts, Education and Business. There's things about income and housing. My personal favorite is going to be this one with pet ownership, which I think is really cute. But there's lots of things about household spending, crime, that sort of thing. So a lot of really helpful information, but I really want to focus on healthcare. I want to know what kind of people have healthcare, how much healthcare they have, so that, if they don't necessarily need to evacuate, but people are injured, then, what kind of options do they have? So since there's no real healthcare information out there, I'm going to create my own infographic panel. So with this, I have the option to actually search through any and all of the data within Business Analyst. Or I can actually look for these predefined categories. So I could search for healthcare, but we'll notice that there's actually a health option right here. So I'll click on that, and it's going to show me the most popular variables within the health category. So I just want to caveat saying this is by no means an exhaustive list of all the health indicators and information that Business Analyst has, but these are just the most popular variables. So I'm going to select these ones: median age, health insurance, and population with one type of health insurance. They're going to add to my little shopping cart, my little bucket, and I'll hit next, and my infographic is going to be generated. So one thing that I can do is change the layout. I think making them staggered looks a little bit cooler here. Then I also have the ability to edit text here. So I want to name this one healthcare. So it's a little bit more unique to what I'm focusing on. And then I have the ability to change these shapes and icons. So Esri has a bunch of default ones that you can search for. There's a lot of different a lot of icons here. So since I'm doing median age, I'll focus on people, so I can click that one. Going to health insurance, I'll click another one. I also have the ability to, look through my own images. If I had a specific one or an SVG, I could do that as well. But there's tons of categories here, so you're likely to find something that you need. So for healthcare, I can select some of these options here that are health related and really start to personalize my infographic and make it a little bit more understandable. And then the last thing that I want to do is actually change the color here. So if we remember, the default infographic has blue and orange. The one I deleted, those ones are orange. So I'm just going to really quickly change those all to orange so they match my template a little bit better. And I'll be able to save that template here, and I can actually save this infographic template to my content, which now makes it reusable. So every time I go back into, infographic panels, the My Panel section, it's going to show up here along with other ones that I've created. So I can just grab it and throw it into any template that I'm working with. So now I have the at-risk population template that I really wanted, but it's also been customized to add healthcare instead of business-related information. So it's really what I want. Now I can go ahead and save this template. I'm going to call it custom template Julia, so I know which one I'm talking about. And then this is going to save, and I'll be able to go back into my map up top here. Click back into Infographics. As I mentioned, the key facts one is default, so that one's going to show up. But now I have the option at the bottom to grab my template, and I could also make it default as well. So if this is one that I think my organization is going to use a lot, that's something that I can do. But anyways, I'll go pick that custom template that I just created. And now we'll see that this information has been updated and changed for Galveston. So I can see the median age, I can see health insurance and population with health insurance as well. And if I change, the range, these numbers would be dynamic and update as well. So that's a really simple way that I can use completely out of the box functionality to create a infographic in Business Analyst. So any of you could easily follow along the steps that I did and create this exact same infographic for yourselves. One of the additional features of Business Analyst that I want to get into is the ability to add your own data. So the at-risk infographic that I created was really cool, but I know that Galveston and surrounding areas have a really large homeless population, and I know that those people are extremely at risk if there is requirement for an evacuation or if they were to get injured due to a natural disaster. Now, Business Analyst has a lot of data, but they don't have anything on homelessness, not to the extent that I'm looking for. However, I know that within my organization, I have previously, uploaded that kind of data and I've created web maps with it. So I can actually go in and add my own data here to the map. So I can add it through my organization with web maps and layers. Or I also have the ability to import a file. So if I have it as a shape file, if I have it as just an Excel spreadsheet, I could bring it in that way, as well as more custom data setup as well. So I mentioned it's in my organization, so I'm going to grab it here. So we'll see that I have access to all of my content as well as anything that's been shared with my organization or my groups, and I can even pull from Living Atlas as well. But within my content, I'll search for homelessness, and I'll be able to grab this layer that I have that has homelessness counts within the United States. So as I add it, we're going to see the legend, and then I zoom out a little bit, we'll notice some major cities that really have data. So Houston has a lot of homeless population, so that's going to show up there. So now that I have it within my map, I can actually go ahead and create I can create infographics that utilize not only business analyst data, but also the data that's in my map. So I'll go back to the report builder here, and I'm going to add a template from the gallery. So this is going to look similar to that slide that I showed you of Helen Thompson's content. So a lot of her templates are actually up here. They're really beautiful. They're really easy to use. So I would definitely recommend you use some of these if this is the type of information you're looking to show. But there's a ton of stuff on community profiles. The COVID templates that Julia Bayer showed earlier are also available here. And there's one on disaster impact reports, which is kind of exactly what I'm looking for. So I'm going to add this one. I'm going to open it up and see what we have. We'll notice that this one is 2 pages here. I have the ability to scroll up and down, but it's very encompassing of the sort of things that I wanted previously. We have, age, population, we have information on healthcare, we have that at-risk population, language, and then even more health insurance information here. So it's really encompassing of a lot of stuff that I want, but I do want to add my own data in for homelessness. So one thing that I'm not really interested in here is household income and home value. That is definitely very important for disaster impacts financially. But since I'm just focusing on the human component of this, I'm just going to go ahead and really quickly get rid of these here. And so now I have a lot of empty space in my template that I can work with, that I can add my own data. So I would do this by just adding a new free-floating element. So the first thing that I'm going to do is add a table with variables here. So I'll click this. And now that I have layers within my map, I not only have the ability to search for data or choose these pre-baked categories, but I have this option to search through my map layers. So I can select that, and now I'll see all of the attributes that are within my point in time homeless count layer that I added to the map. So I'm just going to select, maybe the first 10 or so ones that I want to include. They're going to add to my little cart. I'm going to hit apply, and this table is going to be generated right away, and it's going to show up on my template. And now I can drag and drop it to where I want. I can reshape it, make it a little skinnier so it fits in better, a little taller so I make sure none of my information is cut off. And we'll see that, using the table feature within this template, it's kind of maintained the color scheme, it's maintained, the text, that sort of thing. I can go ahead and edit it if I wanted to change something. So once again, there's not a ton to change. It's pulling all this information that I used in map layers and that I selected. The only thing that I'm going to change in here is just to change the title so it's a little bit more appealing. So I'll name it homelessness counts. I'll click apply, and it's going to change right here. So now I have this table here that has homelessness information. The last thing that I want to do is just add a couple of icons or indicators of homelessness information. So once again, I'll go to create my own. I'll go back to categories, select my map layers, and I can search for different things. So I want to pull the overall homeless, add that to my bin. And then I also want to pull, let's see, the total sheltered homeless, and then also the total unsheltered homeless. So I want to know exactly what we're working with. We'll hit next. I can change the layout again, like I showed you earlier. And I'm just going to really quickly browse some shapes and icons. So I'll go back to people, Select this for homeless. For sheltered homeless, I'll select a household one, and for unsheltered, I'll select this one. And then really quickly again, give it a better title here. I can save it again, and now it's going to show up, right next to my healthcare. So I can grab this one. It's going to add as a free floating element, and once again, all I have to do really is resize it and place it within my infographic. So right away, I was able to edit this, really beautiful template. I was able to take out what I don't want, bring in what I don't need, or I'm sorry, bring in what I do need, which would be my own data. And then I can go ahead and save it as disaster impact report. I'm going to put my name at the end so that I know within my org that it's mine. And it's going to save this template for me real quick. And then after it does that, once again, we can access in the map what this would look like. So I'll go back to the map just briefly. I am, for this scenario, going to select Houston here because I know that it has a much bigger homeless population than Galveston. So we'll get a little bit richer data, but I'll go to my infographics here. This time I'll scroll down to my own infographics. I'll pick disaster impact report. And once this loads, I'm going to be able to see my 2-page report here with all the information, and then specifically my homeless population here. So, and we can see from this part of the table that it is definitely pulling from Houston. So all of this information is accurate. And then, I can share it within my org. So if Julia Bayer wanted to use it for a different location that she's focusing on for natural disasters, she can absolutely do that. And, we're able to create this library and save a lot of time by sharing our work using these dynamic templates. So just to kind of rehash what we've gone over, we showed really out-of-the-box functionality of, creating an out-of-the-box infographic, customizing that infographic a little bit more, and then really starting to customize your infographics even further by bringing in your own data and then using templates to do that. So with that, I will hand it back to Julia Bayer, who's going to go into how you can customize these infographics even further using Business Analyst, and then how you can create infographics across a couple of different parts of the platform.
Yeah, thank you, Julia. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Waiting for it to load. Perfect. Okay, so as Julia Bell talked about, I'm going to be showing how we can go even further in creating infographics in Business Analyst, and then talking a bit about infographics across the platform. And so to get started with, on my Business Analyst project, I focused in here on downtown DC. Our office is in the DC area, so I want to focus on a city I'm pretty familiar with. And since Julia and I have the same name, we both enjoy smoothie bowls, I thought we would have some fun with this today and create an infographic for a prospective business I'm calling Julia's Juice. But this same workflow and same infographic and what I'm going to show you today could really be used for anything across the platform, not just a retailer site selection, but any other use cases for business or community analyst and infographics as well. And so to get started with creating this infographic I have up here, I'm going to build an infographic from scratch. So whereas Julia Bell focused mostly on using infographic templates and kind of customizing that, I'm going to talk about how we can create our own template and start working in there to create a specific infographic. So to get started with that, I'm going to click here on blank templates. And rather than having templates filled in for me, I have a lot more flexibility with how I want to get started with this infographic. I like to create a custom template with grids. It helps me to organize the different elements and make sure everything is well spaced. And for this infographic, I'm going to do a template, a 2x3 grid that will give a good layout and help me balance my elements well. And so now within my 2x3 template, I can change the size of these boxes. I can move them up and down, and I can also merge or split the different boxes as well. So even using this grid as a starting point, I have flexibility with how exactly I want to configure that. And once I am satisfied with my grid here, I'm going to click Save Infographic Template, and I'm just going to call this demo. And so once this loads, I'm ready to get started building my infographic. The first thing I like to do is to change the theme of my infographic up here at the top. For my juice bar, I'm going to do a purple and orange theme with my infographic in my business. You can also, if you have specific themes and branding that you typically use, you can also create your own color theme and save that as a theme within Business Analyst as well, so that every time that you create an infographic, you'll have that theme available for you. You can also change the font. If you have a specific font you typically use, you can set that to use in your infographic as well, or add a background image if that's important to you. And once I'm ready to get started on my infographic, I'm going to start by adding a panel from another template. And so when I do this, it'll open up all of the standard templates as well as templates that have been shared with me or templates I have previously created. And for this infographic panel, I just want a bit of intro information on my business, and I'm going to take that from an infographic I've previously created called Julia's Juice. So when I open that, I can add the specific panel I have in mind to my infographic, and it's popped in there. Rather than having to type out the same thing and configure it as I previously have, I can just take something I've already configured in another template and add it to my infographic. For my next panel here, I'm going to add a map. As Julia Bell talked about, you don't have to include a map within your infographic. Some infographics are quite map heavy, some don't show any maps, but I always recommend adding a map. We are all about geography and understanding locational context and situational awareness. So I always like to include a map within my infographic. You have the same base map options that you have within your ArcGIS organization. I like to do the light gray canvas. I'm not focused specifically on the street network, and I just want to have a map that will help my data stand out. And then here for my bottom panel, I'm going to add an infographic as well. And so you'll notice that because I've set my color theme when I started, that my infographic options here are in that same color theme rather than having to go in and change the colors of the icons and the text. They've already been configured within that color theme that I have. And for this panel, I'm going to choose an infographic on household spending. I want to get a sense of how much money people are willing to spend on a juice bar, if this would be a good area for that. And then even within this infographic panel, I have options in terms of arrangement, so I can choose how I want to arrange my icons. I also, in the data picker here, I can choose to unselect or get rid of certain data variables as well. For this one, I'm not concerned about computer and hardware spending, so I'm going to remove that. And my options for alignment will automatically showcase ones that focus in on 4 different indicators here. With my data as well, I can also do an index, which is really a great way to get a sense of things. We know 100 is the average, and if I click on index for my data, the numbers will update and they'll show that the spending on food and apparel in this neighborhood is a bit above the average, which is a helpful indicator to know when thinking about if I should open a business. And once I am satisfied with my infographic panel here, I'm going to save and it'll be added to my new infographic template. And now for my main chart here on the right hand side, I'm going to create a chart. I think this is a good way to showcase a lot of data and a lot of different variables I'm interested in. And so at this point, this probably looks familiar, but this is our main data picker. And if I go to the top, I can type in a variable. So in this case, I'm interested in juice, what people are spending. And rather than having to look through each of the different data collections, when I type in my term juice, it pops up all of the different potentially relevant data sets across the different data collections without me having to go through and individually find which ones would be relevant. So to get started with creating my chart, I'm going to focus in on what people are spending at home. So I'm going to choose this frozen fruit and juice data. I'm going to drag it to my chart. And I'm also going to choose fresh fruit juice and add it to my chart. And it automatically appends to my current series so that I can view this multiple data together. And then finally, under household furnishings, so a different data set, but with relevant variables for me, I'm going to take this information on electric juicers and add it to my my chart as well. Within my chart, I have different options for determining what type of chart I want to make. The default is the vertical bar chart. It's pretty standard, but we have more complex chart options as well. In some of the infographics Julia Bell showed, we had a waffle chart, a ring chart, a donut chart. So you can get quite specific and use more advanced charting visualizations. But for this chart, I'm just going to stick with a horizontal bar chart. My data is pretty straightforward and I don't need to get too fancy with it. And to customize it a bit further, I'm going to click on chart options and I'm going to change the title. So the title for my chart automatically defaults to the name of the first data variable I added, but I'm just going to give it a basic title. I'm going to call it juice facts. And under my vertical axis here, I'm also going to give this a title. I'm going to call it variables. And one thing that's really nice about Business Analyst is as I type, it automatically updates the chart so I can see what it'll look like without having to click through a bunch of things, see if I like it, and then going back, it's doing it automatically as I make changes. And under my horizontal axis, because this is dollar amount, I'm interested in understanding how much people are spending. I'm going to click on the show currency symbol to provide a bit more context to my chart here. And I'm going to give this a title as well. I'm going to call it total spent. And then under my horizontal bar chart, I'm going to choose to show bar icons. And so this gives me a bit more options to customize my chart, make it a little bit more visually appealing and fun to look at. And so I'm going to browse for an image. And I'm going to, Julia talked about how we can bring in an image from Business Analyst that's provided, but in this case, I'm going to use some SVG images I've previously downloaded to use here. So the first one under household owned electric juicer, I'm going to choose this blender image. And these are images. If you have images you work with, you have them downloaded, you can add them to your project quite quickly. And then one of the most powerful parts I find with creating a chart within an infographic is turning on this compare with geographies. And so this allows me, I like to do the bars, but you can also do lines. This allows me to see how much people are spending within my site and my area of interest relevant to other geography levels. In this case, I've clicked on the whole country, states, counties. I could even get as fine grained as a specific block group or on the county subdivision. And I think it's just a nice way to bring in geography to my infographic and get a better understanding of my data. And then once I'm done here, I'm going to click apply. We'll also notice within, if we go into our data picker, we can get more information at any point on the data we have here. Just if you scroll over the eye, it gives you information on where the data is from, the data source. So if you are ever unsure what your data means, or you want to add different data variables and see if they're the correct data for your chart, you can go back here and get more information on the specific data you're looking at. And for my final part of my infographic here, I'm going to add one of the newer options within Business Analyst, which is the nearby element. I think this is a great option to help, again, bring in some of that geographic context and just get a better understanding of what I'm looking at relevant to other locations. And so within Business Analyst, we have our business and facility search, which is quite popular. I'm sure many of you have worked with that before. You can use that to find specific businesses or business types within an area. Or with our nearby widget, we can also bring in a layer from ArcGIS. So if you have specific data or layers you want to showcase in your infographic, this is a great way to do that. So in my case, I have a layer on BC grocery stores that I want to visualize on my infographic. I think that's relevant to understanding where I should open a juice bar. So I click Add, and I can configure the specific attributes I want to have added from this feature layer into my infographic. And so in this case, I just am focused on the store name and what ward they're in. I'm not super focused on the address that'll show up on the map. And then once I'm good there, I click Next. I recommend adding these points to the map. I think when you run the infographic, it's nice to see exactly where this other information is on the map and just provide, again, that sense of geography and where things are relevant to each other. And then I click Apply. So now when I go back to my completed infographic here, I can see the nearby widget. I've added these different stores to the map. When I highlight over them, they show up dynamically on the map as well. I also can, any of these indicators, I can click Explore for more, and I get a sense of a further breakdown of this data. I can also share out any one of these indicators as well. Right under the Explore for more, it's quite straightforward to export this infographic either as a PDF or an HTML so that I could embed it into something like a story map. And with my infographic as a whole, I can also export it as a PDF if I wanted to just have a static printout of it, or a dynamic HTML if I wanted to embed it into something like a story map. And this is just some of the out-of-the-box customization with Business Analyst, but we can even take it even further using our JavaScript API and some of the developer options available for us there as well. And so if you're familiar with the JavaScript API and you're comfortable using some of the developer tools, you can extend the functionality using the report player widget, and you can create an infographic within your application using the starter templates as well as custom infographic templates you might have created within your organization. And as the final part of this webinar today, we want to talk a bit about infographics across the platform. And so most of our webinar today focused on Business Analyst specifically, but infographics are available elsewhere in the platform. We have options within ArcGIS Pro, so the desktop application, and then more of the WebGIS applications like Web App Builder, Maps for Office, Maps for Power BI. And to get started, I am going to show an example of an infographic within Web App Builder. And so here I've created a web application showing Wi-Fi locations in Washington, D.C. I wanted to get a sense of where I could get free public Wi-Fi. And so I created an infographic that shows a breakdown of these locations, both indoor and outdoor. This infographic chart looks similar to what I've been showing previously in Business Analyst, but not quite as complex as what's available there. And to get started creating this infographic, it's pretty straightforward. Within Web App Builder, the infographic is a widget, a configurable widget. And so when I go to configure it, I have, again, elements within an infographic page that we've talked about within Business Analyst. I can create a title for my infographic, so just pretty straightforward. And then the main part of this infographic is the chart. Here I chose to display feature counts by category, but we have a couple of different ways that we could showcase our data. And then for the display, we can play around with the size of the chart here, and we can also control the color as well. We can turn on some of the data labeling or the legend if that's important. I can add text at the bottom to give a bit more of a description. And just adding that as another way to take the power of infographics and being able to convey complex information in a straightforward and visually appealing manner within a web builder. And lastly, I wanted to talk a bit about infographics within ArcGIS Pro. I'm sure many of you work with ArcGIS Pro as a desktop application, and a lot of people don't know that infographics are available there as well. We have right here at the top, we have this infographic tool. It's taking advantage of Esri data and geo-enrichment services and a lot of the same tools within Business Analyst, but here in ArcGIS Pro. And so I have a boundary of Washington, D.C. as a shapefile within my project. And then when I click within this infographic, a template will automatically pop up for me. My default template here is the at-risk population, but I'm going to change to the commute profile. And so when this loads, rather than having to go through what Julia did with creating a site and then creating rings around it, it's automatically using my shapefile, in this case, the DC boundary, as my infographic template for me. I can also, within my settings, so I can also choose an option called My Variables. So I can add my own data into my infographic and choose that as an infographic option. We have both so I'm signed into the same ArcGIS Online organization as I was using within Business Analyst. So I have the templates I've previously created, as well as Esri templates, and then this My Variables option, which is unique to ArcGIS Pro, and it lets me specifically add data I have in mind and use that within my infographic. And now if I click off my shapefile, so we don't have a predefined boundary for me, and I click again within my infographic, it's going to use this commute profile template, and it's automatically assuming a 30-minute drive time. So again, unlike what Julia was showing within Business Analyst, I'm not having to create my site first and generate the rings. It's doing that for me. I have options here in terms of what type of buffer I want to do. If I want to do driving time, walking time, driving distance, I can change the number for the distance or the time. And then I talked about that My Variables option. I can also choose that. And this data will load as kind of a chart layout using Esri's demographic data within ArcGIS Pro. And again, I have options to share and export this infographic, either again as a PDF or HTML to embed within a story map or a dashboard or something else. And so with that, I'm gonna go back to my slides here. And Julia Bell is gonna finish by talking through some of the other options for infographics within ArcGIS.
All right, thanks, Julia. So I just want to touch on a couple more of the products across the platform that do have some infographic capability. They're not going to be as overarching and all-encompassing as Business Analyst or Community Analyst, but we did have a question on using infographics in Power BI, so that is definitely possible. They're going to be a lot less developed, but they are available. So we're going to see here examples of ways that we can, incorporate data, and these are dynamic. So this is going to be very similar to an indicator widget within a dashboard. So limited, but it is possible. We also have ability to do this within the the next slide, we'll see that we have the ability to use infographics within ArcGIS Maps for Office. So once again, a little bit limited, but these do allow you to kind of, customize your pop-up, make it look a little bit more interesting than it would normally. So this is another way that we can integrate infographics across the platform. And then just to wrap up, we want to give you, a couple of tips to make better infographics. So you can read, all of these, but to highlight a few, we've found that really the best infographics are created when you design it first and then build it. So, maybe whiteboard or take a piece of paper and kind of think out what you want to include first before you go through the complexity of building it and picking the data, so you have an idea in mind before you start. Kind of going off of that, we also want to focus on the less is more aspect. So we've seen a lot of infographics that have a lot of really great data, but they are just too crowded and cluttered, and it's hard to figure out what to focus on. So we would definitely recommend, cleaning it up, making it visually appealing, and then going from there. And then lastly, we really do want to hit home on the ability to make these infographic templates reusable, whether that be, an element, a card, or an entire template, so that you really, within your organization, have a library of infographics available to you so that you don't have to spend time creating a new infographic every time a new ask comes up. So with that, we will hop into the Q&A. We've been answering a few as they've come through, but Raquel, have you seen any that you might want to send our way specifically?
I'm taking a look at now. Let's see here. One follow-up question, is Business Analyst package included in 10.8.1 version? The answer was yes, it is. And then a follow-up to that is, can we sync with Microsoft SharePoint?
Yeah, so I don't believe you can sync with Microsoft SharePoint with Business Analyst. I could be wrong, so I'll do a little bit more information with that. To be honest, I don't have a ton of experience with that. Julia Bayer, do you know anything more than that?
Yeah, I'm not super familiar with that. I would have to do a bit more research as well, but I don't believe that can be done off the top of my head.
Thank you. One more that came in is, are public voting data sets available by county, HD, and precinct?
Yeah, that's a good question as well that I don't know off the top of my head. I can send on. We have quite good documentation on our data and what's available. I can send on a link to look there.
Yeah, I will put a link in answering this question with the list of all of the data providers that Esri uses for Business Analyst. I am not sure about public voting data sets, but we do get a lot from the census, from American Community Survey, that sort of thing. So.
Okay, thank you. And one final one, does the Business Analyst include features and information concerning industry such as geothermal power plants?
Again, yeah, the link Julia will provide on our data sources should have information there in terms of what would be available for that industry.
Great, thank you. I think we can follow up with any others that come in.
Yeah, and just to point out that there is definitely a lot of energy and kind of industry related statistics, so I would assume so, but don't quote me on it. Yeah, and so we just got a question asking, if clients make their data available, can others use it from the same infographic menu? And yes, if you have that information available within your organization or shared with you, then you can absolutely bring it in the same way that Julia Bayer and I did within our demos.
And so with that, if there are no other questions, Thank you everyone for joining us today. Again, feel free to follow up with questions as they come up or you start working on infographics.
Yep, and please do take the survey that will be listed at the end of the webinar and also sent out in the email by Raquel. And yes, feel free to contact us. Our emails as well as Raquel's are available if you have any follow-up questions that we weren't able to get to in this webinar.
Thank you.